I think it's recording now. I've got my super presentation that I've created just for you guys. No one ever has seen it before. So you're going to be the first people to see my super lecture that I've created specifically for you. Yes. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say VIP, I'd say more like premium access or premier access. You're gonna have the chance to criticize me first for the outrageous things I'm about to say. So I've already put the slides, and I've got a little confession to make. I almost thought that I wouldn't be able to make it today because my son had to be taken into hospital this morning at 5 a.m. And as a precautionary measure, I actually recorded this lecture. So if you go to Panopto, I'm going to be half of the lecture apologizing for not being there live. But since my son is now back home and I managed to sort of get back to normal, I've decided to do it live again, and I've kind of rehearsed it. So let's get started then. I suppose first I need to share my slides, which I'm going to do right now. I have the tendency to not be able to multitask very well, so I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, but if not, then just hold on with me. Hopefully, at the end, you're free also to if I don't see your comments, you can also interact me just with your microphone. I don't mind. I know it's a little bit more involved, but you know, I think when we are online, it is good to not just me speaking all the time. Although I suspect that that's what's going to be the case for today. So yeah, no more preambles. My name is Dr. Manuel Corpas, and I am senior lecturer at the University of Westminster. I currently lead the MSc AI and Digital Health, and I have self-anointed me as the sort of AI guy of life sciences at the University of Westminster. I've been running this MSc degree for 2 years, and I just finished my fellowship as a fellow of the Alan Turing Institute, which is UK's national capability for AI. So I guess I have a few credentials I can drag for me to self-qualified as the AI guy at life sciences here at Westminster. Let me just bring and set up the scene on this idea, which by now is probably a little bit boring for me, of precision medicine, which it would have been the first slide that I gave last year for this module. But if you hold on with me for a bit, there's a lot of new material that I'm going to introduce. And the reason why I'm introducing a lot of new material is because I don't know about you, but my work has been significantly, dramatically, revolutionarily transformed, particularly in the past 3 months, since I would say December. Although in October I was already quite, things had changed. It's been kind of gradual. Hopefully, some of you will identify with the sentiment. Precision medicine, what it's trying is to leverage the fact that we now have a huge amount of data production related to patients, to wearables, to new high throughput laboratory techniques that really produce an amount of data that has grown exponentially. And this data describes specific facets of our health and can be used for us to really understand the bigger questions around how our organisms work, how we inherit traits, how can we prevent disease, what are the sort of lifestyle interventions that improve our health span. Yeah, and I emphasize health span. I'm not emphasizing lifespan, but health span. One thing is to live, another thing is to live healthily, right? You don't want to be in a coma state for 10 years, right? So this vision of precision medicine was introduced around 10 years ago by Obama. And the idea was that by putting together under one single resource where we will have enough number of patients, which would allow us to have sufficient statistical power to identify patterns by the integration or through the integration of genetics, imaging, questionnaires, you name it. By putting all of that data together and making it accessible for research, we should be able to have a much better understanding of the physiology of organisms, in this case, humans. By spending a huge amount on the genetics and all of the other types of technologies, we should be able to have a much better harness of our diagnostics, of our therapies, and of our ability to accelerate discovery. And to some extent, this has worked, but not as fast as we would have liked. People were complaining that, the Human Genome Project, which was initially released in 2001, it would cure all diseases. And precision medicine, its main sort of theory would be that now, this time, 10 years later, by having this huge amount of investment in big cohorts, this thing will happen. But of course, we know that hasn't happened. We know that compared to other fields, such as finance or the travel industry or other digital fields, their transformation into a much more accelerated, higher impact field has been very, very different from what's happening in medicine. The reason why this is happening, and I'm going to speculate and hypothesize this, is that we are, although our ability to generate data has grown exponentially, I don't think that our needs to be able to have sufficient data for big models to be able to have the type of predictions that we require have been produced yet. And they haven't been produced yet because we need to have much bigger data sizes. And whereas the data that has powered the AI revolution where we are in the midst of today, has been powered by the huge amount of data that was accessible via the internet, via all the books that were digitalized and so on. So the AI revolution, which happened precisely in parallel as the precision medicine promise was framed, has accelerated so much because of the convergence of three things. First of all, we had a huge amount of data which could be simply scraped from the internet. Two, the progress in our ability to generate chips and compute in a chip as well as massive scale has also accelerated exponentially in the past decade, particularly with the development of GPUs, graphical processing units, coming from companies such as NVIDIA, which today is the most valuable company in the world. The economy of NVIDIA, currently at $4 trillion, is bigger than the economy of the UK. And this compute power, together with the huge amount of data that has then been combined with the algorithms to enable the appropriate mathematical representation of knowledge, these three things, algorithms, data, and compute, is what's made the AI revolution, which is today changing the way we work, changing the way we're going to even live in the next few years. That's what has powered this current revolution. But I would argue that that's not happening in health and in medicine, simply because we don't have the data. We don't have the near as much the numbers that we would need, because the data is very expensive to produce. It's highly sensitive. We don't have hospital data that anyone can freely download. And also because it's, I don't know if I said it before, but it's highly sensitive. So because of that, I would strongly argue that precision medicine is not achieving the same levels of precision medicine. That said, however, I don't think that this is necessarily a reason to believe that the revolution is not happening in medicine. The revolution is happening, but at a level which is kind of contained mostly by the access of data and the regulatory barriers framework around the access and the protection of highly sensitive data as it is health data. Okay? So I think I'm speaking incredibly slowly. So I'm going to jump a little bit. I've mentioned that key to the precision medicine vision are biobanks. And I'm going to delve a little bit more onto this thing called biobanks. Here in the UK, we are particularly fortunate because the most influential health database in the world has been developed with UK patient or individual data, and it's called the UK Biobank. And the UK Biobank has transformed the way biomedical research is performed, and it's really the beacon and the most advanced implementation on bringing together at scale different data sources from individuals. So the UK Biobank currently contains 500,000 individuals for which we have whole genome sequencing. We have around 100,000 patients or individuals that have undergone MRI data. Just to give you an idea, I counted it myself. The UK Biobank has for each patient 14,000 measurements. So if you could imagine an Excel spreadsheet that contains 14,000 columns and 500,000 rows. So 14,000 columns, each column corresponds to a specific measurement. It can be an image, it can be a number, it can be a whole questionnaire, it can be a blob of data. And you have that for 500,000 individuals, all under one single umbrella, readily accessible framework. That's what the UK Biobank has. And it has cost millions, hundreds of millions of pounds. And nothing like that exists anywhere else in the world. So the UK Biobank, for all its sins, has been a tremendous, and it is a tremendous global resource, which currently is the beacon of what we understand the way biomedical research should be performed. And why is it so important to have this data together? It's not only the fact that we have electronic health records, questionnaires, all interlinked. Yeah, we have the individual at the center with a data cloud of different types of measurements, all related to the individuals. This gives us the necessary statistic power to be able to find relationships, significant statistical relationships amidst the complexity of biology, which is messy, uncertain, inconsistent a huge amount of the time, and difficult, right? As it turns out, biology is more difficult than physics, simply because of the huge amount of knowledge that we really still don't understand about the molecular behavior of cells. We don't even understand how cells work, let alone individuals, right? So the UK Biobank becomes a reference point for us to really understand biology. But of course, it's not near enough. It's not near enough for us to really understand how it works. It's just the beginning. The problem with the UK Biobank is that, like any other resource that is being developed in a particular country, guess what? It represents the population that exists in the UK. And guess what? at the time when data started being collected, well, around 90% of all the population were white British, as they call it. What that means is that it is not a representation of the global populations that exist around the world. And before we started with the Human Genome Project and before biology became data rich and data intensive, which really happened at the turn of the century, we had so little data that it didn't really matter whether the data that we had came from Northern European ancestries or from African ancestries or whatever. But as we have learned and we have gone deeper into our ability to capture and generate data sets related from patients, we started realizing that a lot of the what we call training data, that is the data that is being used to then build models that help us understand the hidden relationships, it's going to be really good at replicating and even amplifying the biases of the data that we already have. So if most of the data is white, wealthy, healthy, northern, white, British, European, then it means that the further you are to that particular type of data set, in terms of ancestry, in terms of socioeconomic status, in terms of the environment, in terms of what you eat, the further away the models that have been developed in our current understanding of medicine, the further away the performance of those models. And we now begin to see how structurally biased the biomedical enterprise that has been developed throughout even centuries revolving around a very, very small, unique type of populations which are not representative of the real diversity and richness of global health. And as a consequence, we see how many people who get the diagnostics, which have been based on this type of population, well, it doesn't work for them. We already have lots and lots of exceptions in the NHS. You know, if this person comes from an African background and they have these particular symptoms, they have much higher chances of having, you know, sickle cell anemia. We have diseases that, you know, are more prevalent in Ashkenazi Jews. Some diseases that are more prevalent if you are living in high altitude, like for instance, tuberculosis and so on. And all of these sort of susceptibilities, which we now begin to understand, are the sort of other side to the millennia, millions of years, where humans have adapted to the very diverse conditions in which they have lived. So if all of your ancestry has lived in the savannah in Africa and your diet has been mostly meat, and you have been eating that for thousands of years, your gut is going to be, for instance, your ability to metabolize starch is going to be highly, highly reduced compared to an agrarian community in the middle of Gobi Desert that have been, you know, living out of wheat or rice for millennia. So these they will have adapted completely different, and it's going to be different for people who live on the Tibet, you know, 4,000 meters high. You know, their adaptation to low oxygen environments at high altitude are going to be very different from someone who lives I don't know, on the shores of Amazon, of the Amazon River. And so these are the new complexities and situations which we just now begin to grasp. And it's great that we begin to grasp, because it means that we are getting closer to the truth of our understanding of the beauty in the diversity of the human species. But of course, this has its challenges, and the challenges is that we have partial data in medicine, and therefore the models, the system, everything is going to be partial, it's going to be biased. And we now know that this is not fair. And it's not a question of social justice alone, which it is. It's also a question of really being able to understand how all of these different environments, how all of these evolutionary processes have defined human adaptation. So the problem with big data is that data, although it is big, is scattered, is biased, is siloed, is complex, is heterogeneous. And we who are researchers working in this field, we have, I mean, I'm not the only one who is talking about this need for diversity and equity in biomedical research, you know, what I call health equity. We all understand, regardless of where we come from. I think the issue is how we get governments in this Trumpian era to really think global. I mean, if we cannot even agree on the fact that climate change is going to mess up the environment if we don't do anything, you know, healthcare, which costs a huge amount of money, is going to have the same issues. Okay, and I'm not claiming that we or I am going to fix the issues. What I can do, however, with the little money and the little capacity that I have, is to pinpoint where the gaps are, where the biases are, where the lack of representation and the invisibility of the populations are actually affecting us all. If we are able to measure the problem, which nobody really understands, how these biases in the lack of diversity, representation, inconsistency of data sets is affecting, we only have anecdotal evidence. But if we have the appropriate mechanisms to measure inequity in health, we will have advanced the capacity to be able to close those gaps. So we want to close the gap. We know there are gaps. Let's first scope them. Let's provide the appropriate mechanisms to be able to measure them. So just to give you some figures. %86 of all of the genetic data that we currently have for risk prediction, genetic risk prediction, 86% is based on European population. European population, which can be, you know, people living in Australia, North America, you know, they're all European ancestries. And so for most of the global population that we have in the planet are severely underrepresented in our current data. So I'm not saying that underrepresentation necessarily needs to be addressed. I'm going to say something outrageous. I don't care about diversity. Do you know what I care? I care about the artificial fabricated barriers that limit other people's having access to the same standard of health. I don't care if you are more diverse or not. What I care is that if somebody else, because they have less money, because they were born somewhere, because of whatever reason, they don't get the same level of standard for healthcare. And I would say that we would remediate that inequality of health if we look harder and we push harder into the biases in the kind of data, because data really is what the base is for understanding of science, and our understanding of science is what is going to then condition the generation of clinical trials, the selection of the specific diseases that are going to be studied versus the ones that are not going to be studied. If a disease happens to be affecting people who can pay for the treatment, they're more likely then to be funded than diseases that affect 1.5 billion of global South populations, malaria, tuberculosis, diarrhea. These are diseases that we have 1.5 billion people whose main diseases are those, and they get less, the burden is huge, and yet they get less amount of financing, less amount of research, less amount of biomedical enterprise dedication, just simply because they're in the wrong country, they don't have the money, okay? So this is kind of, everyone knows that, but it hasn't been measured. And what I would say is that today we have the opportunity to change that. Today we have the opportunity to measure via AI, via the capacity to be able to understand the global health landscape, and really being able to correlate, because the data exists. The World Health Organization just published the Global Burden of Disease study, where you have the most important diseases people die of, around 175 disease categories. And we have specifically how much, we call it disability adjusted life years, or DALYs, disability adjusted life years, which are a standardized way of quantifying burden in human species. So we have a standard way of comparing how much burden specific diseases are causing to the human race. And because we also have the data available on the internet, available on the research paper, we can correlate amount of research effort with the amount of global burden. And this is something that I've been working on. And we can see severe disparities. So there's no correlation between the amount of global burden at a global level versus the amount of resources that are being dedicated to specific diseases amounting to global burden. And this is obvious, but I will present some innovative tools that we've developed, whereby we can now measure, we can now say specifically with a evidence-based rigor, and we can pinpoint specifically where the gaps are. We don't have the money, but we can point and we can say, these are the stats. We need to change this, because here you can see all the methodology and you can see all of the data, and we can, because of the current technology that exists, we can now really provide appropriate statistics where governments can look somewhere else, but the data is there and the data is solid, and we can make the point that the biomedical enterprise is essentially, structurally, systematically biased towards rich, wealthy nations' population. Okay? Full stop. Welcome to AI. We all feel it. We all fear it. We all see it around us. We are bombarded everywhere we look. Every piece of news contains AI somewhere. Every post you read is everything we see. Pretty much every aspect of our lives now is touched by AI. Yet, biology is just starting. Biology is now beginning. I think because of the complexity and because of the fact that other areas of the economy have been much more amenable to big data analysis compared to biology and biomedical research and medicine, which in this talk for me are going to be the same. We are now in the era of agentic AI. So what do we mean by agentic? We all have used chatbots, and we all have been impressed by them. But something fundamentally different has happened in the turn of 2025 to 2026. A number of frontier labs have released capabilities that anyone can buy, which are able to not just provide answers to anything. They're able to have the capacity to act, the capacity to take decisions artificially. This is what we call agents, AI agents. AI agents can emulate human behavior at solving problems, looking the literature by themselves, browsing information on the internet, changing course of action based on what they learn, making decisions as to the appropriate solutions, read, write files, change things in the computer. This is what an agent is. And this is where we are at today. And I'm going to argue that this is going to transform not just the way the whole of society works, but very specifically, I believe that biology is going to be agentic by design in the very, very near future. What this means in practice is that the shift that is happening in genomics, but it can be any area of biology, because biology fundamentally now is a data-rich science. And there's enough willpower, interests, and money to tackle drug development and anything around healthcare, particularly extension of our health span. So there's big money on the application of AI in anything that has to do with life sciences. We all in this virtual room are part of that. We studied it, and so it will affect us as not just as people, but also as professionals. And what that means, that the human, which was really at the center of how things were conducted. So you have the researcher that performs a literature review, it installs tools, runs things, analyzes, interprets, publishes. Now that has changed. And what we have at the center now is this automation of all of these processes around autonomous AI-driven agents which drive and accelerate discovery. And I am going to make the distinction between accelerating discovery versus generating discovery. I'm not sure if this will happen in the near future, but my experience and my opinion is that discovery can be accelerated, but it cannot be automated. At the end of the day, human people have to be at the center, but have to be in the loop. Humans have to be in the loop because of AI, it's alien intelligence. It will make things up. It doesn't have the context, the experience, the depth, the connections, the years of understanding that the physical world allows us humans to be able to contextualize whatever AI is able to produce. And so I'm completely against about the fact and the fear-mongering that we get that AI is going to substitute everything, it's going to take our jobs. I don't believe that. AI is going to it's going to substitute the people who don't adapt to using it. So please be an early adopter of AI. Hopefully you now are. But many new jobs will come up as a consequence of the current technologies that they don't exist yet. The only people who should fear, are the people who don't care and who are not willing to adapt to making AI as a sort of centerpiece in terms of how they work. I tell my friends now, I'm no biologist or biotechnologist anymore. I am an AI scientist who happens to be doing biology. And things that now we call AI, the AI will be so ubiquitous, like, computers. Computers are everywhere. When I started doing bioinformatics, you had biologists, real biologists, they are always in the lab. And then, bioinformaticians, they use the computers. So they're kind of weird. But now every biologist does bioinformatics. And so you cannot dissociate computers from biology. The dry lab, wet lab barrier is completely fuzzy. It doesn't exist. It's an artificial, I would say. So something like that will happen with AI. We all are going to be AI scientists. What's going to change or what's going to differentiate us is where and what we apply that AI to. Yeah, and we call that biology. Yeah, and we'll basically not even mention the AI part because everything will be AI powered, enabled anyway. So I've said this already. The bottleneck is not going to be processing power. It's not going to be synthesis. The real bottleneck is going to be that deep expertise that we humans, because of our physical nature, because of our experiences, that deep area of expertise that models are never going to have. Models, the ChatGPTs of the world, they are generalistic. They are never going to be able to touch every single possible application. They act as the foundation. It is our task to be able to carve the very specific niche whereby we apply that into the specific contexts and questions that large language models will never be specifically applied for. And there is where I see the opportunity. And that's what I call deep intelligence. And that's where the bottleneck and the opportunity is for the future of biology. I'm going to jump a little bit into this simply because of the time. If you want to have another more extended version, I invite you to also have a look at the presentation that I've already uploaded into Panopto. I want to now delve a little bit into equity as the foundation for agentic biology. Here I say agentic genomics, but I'm just going to say agentic biology. And I'm going to argue that biology, the future of biology is agentic. Yeah. And since what AI does is really amplify, augment, yeah, and it does it at a scale that has not been experienced before. And I think that's really why everyone has these fears. It's not the fact that it's a new technology. It's sort of the scale at which the augmentation of the processing, of the reasoning, of the generation, and our ability to handle information, AI is able to give us. So it's not the same to be a soldier than to be, somebody who is on a horse. If you are harnessing a horse, you have a lot more capacity. Yeah, it's not the same to be riding a horse than to be in a car. Yeah, so it's that kind of difference. We have now a tool that fundamentally give us the power to go from A to B at much more speed. Of course, if you're going to drive a car, you cannot go through the middle of the countryside. You have to go via roads. And so we have to adapt to the AI ways in the same way that cars need to adapt to roads. But the end point is that we now can cross distances at a speed that had never been possible until now. And because everyone is kind of rushing like headless chickens, and they have no idea as to where to focus, the real importance for all of us is to maintain that focus. Everyone is FOMO. Everyone's the amount of progress is so great. No one can keep up with the tools, and everyone is getting, really distracted. I think at this point in time in history, the real power is to remain focused on the questions, biological questions that truly matter, and then ask those questions, which are really the same questions that we've been asking for centuries. How does life work? How do we inherit traits? How genes are inherited? They're the same questions, but now we have tools that have not been used to answer those questions. So embrace those tools and be the first ones to ask these questions with these new tools. And you'll be able to find new knowledge that nobody else has been discovered yet. Okay? And because of the data, which I said is the basis for artificial intelligence, if you don't have good data, you're never going to have good results. And so I said that precision medicine data is partial. So therefore, the medicine of the future and the medicine of the present has never been so partial, has never been so biased, simply because we now understand the issues around the partiality of this data. And so equity and our ability to really have at the core of how we perform life sciences research around the systemic biases. That's in my opinion, one of the most important foci, or what, in my case at least, is the center of everything I do. Health equity. I cannot fight wars. I don't have millions or billions of dollars, but what I do have is the capacity to harness AI tools and apply them to questions that nobody has asked before, because I'm able to run them and I'm able to understand how to run the current AI models. And because nobody, and this is kind of the Wild West, I'm able to ask questions which then will help me and the people who work with me to be able to enlighten our understanding. And so, talking about enlightening, I don't want people to focus on the negative when we are talking about AI. Yes, there are negatives. Yes, the differences and the biases can be potentially augmented to a level that was not seen before. Yes, many people will have intelligence, super intelligence, or some other people are talking about super abundance. And none of these final aims really satisfy me as a fair and the type of just ethical way for focusing on using AI. But I think AI, and why I am so obsessed as to how AI should be used, and why I believe that we are in a once in a life humanity point today, is because the opportunity is not in the material things. It's not in the power. The opportunity that we have with AI is the ability to allow us to enlighten us in a way that has never been before. AI can process tens of thousands of emails for decades. It can help us understand and see things about ourselves that we didn't even know they existed. And the power it has for processing, if we use it in the right way, rather than helping us achieve big power, what it can help us achieve is enlightenment, wisdom, the ability to make better decisions, guided towards the better good of mankind and humanity. And I call this super enlightenment. You know, I think the current technology has the capacity to enlighten us to an extent that it can help us get closer to the truth, to the real unadulterated truth with capital T, in an opportunity that has never been there before. And if we focus on that, on the real pursuit of truth, I think there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing that is going to stop us becoming better human beings. And if we're going to focus around the area of health and pursuing the truth in human health, then equity, health equity, in my humble opinion, must be at the center of it. And so I'm going to close my lecture. I hope that you guys have found this interesting. I want to give you the thank you for the opportunity to be able to share this thing. As I said, I've never presented this before, and I want you to have a few key takeaways from what I've said. Key takeaway one, I think that biology is going to be transformed not just by AI, but by agents, which is the current incarnation, so to speak, virtual incarnation of AI into autonomous systems that can make decisions on their own based on access to data, compute, and the appropriate context. Key takeaway number two, I believe that deep intelligence, deep expertise is the bottleneck. We are all going to have the same general intelligence. Where we can make a difference is in how we apply that intelligence to very specific, very deep themes. I don't believe that artificial intelligence is going to change the questions that humanity has been asking since the beginning of our civilization. Lao Tzu, Plato, Socrates, Avicenna. Humanity continues to ask the same questions. What changes now is our capacity to be able to answer those questions with new tools, which can help us gather new light towards our better pursuit of our understanding of nature, our understanding of truth with capital T. Key takeaway 3, equity must be built from the start. I cannot envisage any project in the biomedical enterprise, any business, anything that we do in biomedical science must have, in my humble opinion, health equity at the center of it. If we ignore health equity, it's like us ignoring climate change. We can't ignore climate change, whether we like it or not. Health equity must be at the center of how we do biology and biomedical science. Never, ever trust anything that AI gives you. 80% will be utterly correct, but there will be hidden hallucinations. There will be things that have been written that sound perfect, but they will be completely fabricated. Always check figures, check numbers, check references, check citations, authors list, because AI is built to sound good. And it is precisely that feeling that we have inside to dissociate what feels right, what feels correct from what doesn't feel correct. That's the new skill of the 21st century as we move forward on the second, third decade of this 21st century. And so domain-specific agents will beat general models, okay? And this thing of AI, whether you like it or not, is happening. And you guys are young, you are students, you are learning, you have the time. Make sure that you become AI fluent. Stop learning everything else. Prioritize how you apply AI to your particular work. That is the single most fundamental skill you could spend any of the time that you have. Okay? And with that, I'm gonna thank you for your time, and I hope that this presentation has been useful. Thanks for being there. I'm going to now close the recording.